Okay. All right.
Yeah, that does. Okay, so welcome to Jurassic Park.
Da, 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 da,
Yep,
da.
perfect. Beautiful. So anyways, moving on. We have a quick recap here. As you all know, John Hammond created Jurassic Park as an amusement park for children and adults to experience life that we have never experienced before. He invited Alan Grant, Ellie Sattler, Ian Malcolm to the park to make sure that the park was sustainable and that life would not find a way. However, life does find a way. Hammond thought it was a great idea to invite his grandchildren, which to a unsupervised park with flesh-eating dinosaurs is not a great idea. Wayne Knight is a selfish piece of shit and wanted to take all of the embryos for himself and ended up getting acid spit on him or tar by a Dilophosaurus and then died inside of a Jurassic Park Jeep. Due to him being a piece of shit, he cut off the power and all the electrical systems shut down, causing the T-Rex and Velociraptors to escape, which did not end up well for many characters. And then Samuel L. Jackson does not say the classic Mother Effer line one time in this film somehow. And then to the ending scene, which makes no sense to me when a T-Rex steps into a room and you're telling me that these Velociraptors are going to save these humans for no reason, when in reality they would all be dead, and it's garbage. But I do love this movie. All right, so next slide. Steven Spielberg, American film director and screenwriter, currently the most...
1 second.
Okay, anyways, currently the most commercially successful director in the world with a net worth of $3.7 billion. He directed other movies such as Jaws, E.T., Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, Back to the Future, and even the Indiana Jones movie series. And he also has directed the Jurassic Park films. Real good track record. Man is worth a lot of money, as you can see from the $3.7 billion. On to the next slide. Okay, then we have our main characters of the film, such as Dr. Alan Grant, Dr. Ellie Sattler, and Dr. Ian Malcolm. Sam Neill plays Dr. Alan Grant in this film. He also plays in Jurassic Park 3 and will be in the new upcoming Dominion movie. For Jurassic World, he was in Merlin, Thor Ragnarok, etc. He is a paleontologist who specializes in velociraptors in this film. And he is also very, very, what's the word I'm looking here for? Not okay with this idea or concept. Ellie Sattler is played by Laura Dern, also seen in Jurassic Park 3, The Fault in Our Stars. She plays the mother. She's in Wild at Heart with Nicolas Cage, and she's also in October Sky. Dr. Ian Malcolm, Sattler is a paleobotanist, which is a person who specializes in prehistoric plants, as seen in the movie when she feeds those berries to the Triceratops, which is dying because it's sick. Dr. Ian Malcolm is played by Jeff Goldblum and is my favorite character in this film. He is seen in Jurassic Park 2, where he is the main character, The Fly, Independence Day with Will Smith, etc. He is also a very skilled mathematician who specializes in the class act of chaos theory and is also known as a chaotician, as called by many in this film. And he has the famous saying, "Life finds a way," which in this film that is obviously found to be true. On to the next slide. Okay, so two of the most popular dinosaurs in this movie, the Tyrannosaurus Rex and the Velociraptor. 1 second. Okay, they both lived in the Cretaceous period, but obviously you can see the T-Rex lived for a longer time, not very much longer, but for a very small amount. Actually, no, almost the exact same. And then they weigh between 9,900 and 1,800 pounds. Velociraptors obviously weigh a lot less. I put weight up to 33 pounds. That is incorrect. That is not what I meant to put in the slide. But they do grow up to 6 feet or 6 feet 6 inches tall. They have an average speed of 25, and they are actually believed to be the most smartest creature to ever live since human beings, communicating in packs and using a resonating chamber in their throat to communicate and actually call out different ways to let them know where something's at. T-Rexes have an average speed of 17 miles per hour. When he said 32 miles per hour in the movie, that was completely false. They do not run that fast, and they cannot clap their hands. So very short arm. All right. In 1993, Bill Clinton was elected president, and the World Trade Center was bombed. So you can obviously see this year was terrible. Michael Jackson was still top dog at the time with an upcoming rise of Mariah Carey. Other bands were popular in the time, such as Aerosmith. And then popular movies at the time were Jurassic Park, Schindler's List, The Sandlot, movies such as Nightmare Before Christmas, and etc. And to elaborate on this time a little further, 1993 was actually a year of, the 90s. We'll just elaborate on the 90s in general. Michael Jackson, top dog. But, you had a lot of hit movies in the 90s, your classics. So it was kind of an open era for mainly pop culture coming into what it was. Michael Jackson started pop culture back in the 1980s, and then it proceeded into the 90s, which also brought you rap and groups such as the one I cannot think of that I saw earlier. But you have Run DMC, which came out and dropped in the 90s also. On to the next slide. Okay, so questions. I saw a few and I read a few, and one of them which was my favorite question that I asked, honestly, and the scene that does not sit right with me, where kids are trapped in a kitchen with two velociraptors. In reality, are those kids going to live in a room with velociraptors? No, they're going to die. They're not going to make it out of that room, frying pan or not. It's not going to happen. So would anyone like to elaborate or give their opinion on that question in specifics?
I didn't answer that question. I answered the first one, but there was a video a long time ago that they uploaded to YouTube. I don't know if it's still there now, but they actually tested the tensile strength of whether or not a velociraptor's claws would go through common household kitchen items. And yeah, velociraptor claws were about almost a foot long on good ones, and they would slice through just about anything that we have in modern kitchens. So yeah, if that helps your deniability of this scene, I agree.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I also think it's very creative how they hunt in packs and they communicate and they have movements and certain ways that they attack their prey. So if you have two in a room, one's going to go right, one's going to go left. This kid is going to be, both of those kids will be dead in about 5 seconds, realistically. Do you want to elaborate on your answer for the first one?
Oh, yeah. Well, personally, I said that if I were ever in this situation, like Jurassic Park style, without having prior knowledge, I would just not allow it to happen. I'd either burn the park down myself or have someone else do it, because we all know that this is dangerous. I know it sounds like a real shrewd thing, but it's extremely dangerous to do this. But what's funny is that we actually live in a world where stuff like this is possible, because we have cloned animals. Like, we have cloned animals that are alive right now. We're able to make organ and skin tissue from nothing. Like, we can 3D print organs right now. So and there was a sheep that they cloned that was the exact copy that lived for 7 years, and they're continuing research on this project. So it's completely plausible that we could get to something Jurassic Park-esque, and that terrifies me to my core, almost more than Skynet does for Terminator, because both of those things are very real. Not to say, the dinosaurs will come back and take over, but I mean, honestly, they were hardly able to take care of them, and they made the freaking things.
I agree with you 100%. I saw where they cloned that sheep, actually, and I do believe I do think it's possible for this to happen in the future. I don't know if it would be a bad idea, unless like in the newer films where they went over the top and made the Indominus Rex. I don't think it would get that out of hand. But as far as this one goes,
Oh yeah,
I
the
think it's possible.
the Indominus Rex is just them like basically the movie Spliced, which I'm sure Mr. Yeager has seen, and that's on a whole nother level. That's like gene manipulation. But I also said in my answer that there's a difference between cloning a helpful species and a harmful species. Like, we don't want to bring back the megalodon, the mosasaurus, or like just these gigantic creatures that just dominated their era in the Jurassic Cretaceous or Cretaceous eras. But if we could bring back helpful dinosaurs, that because there were several dinosaurs like Triceratops and not Spinosaurus, Stegosauruses, that were spore carriers, and they would help plant vegetation by just being massive and having these big plant dented scales that would carry plant pollen and stuff like that. Those are helpful species that we could probably do with again. And also just to bring back all the animals that we've run into extinction, like the black-horned rhinos or tigers that are currently on the endangered species list, or elephants, for heaven's sakes.
I agree with you.
So I feel like there's a real difference between like Jurassic Park kooky scientist and super out there wacko. Hey, we're gonna splice the most dangerous things on Earth and combine all of its DNA, and also make it able to reproduce asexually, because that was smart.
Yeah, no, that was dumb. It's almost as dumb as the Indoraptor.
I wonder if that science in the movie, like they could maybe clone it based off of the amber, like the mosquito having from like back then, having the DNA. Like I wonder how far fetched that idea is.
I'm sorry they're trying to do it. They
Well,
haven't made progress with their attempt.
Yeah, I know this comes from a novel by a great novelist, Michael Crichton. That's where the screenplay came from. I've always wondered how feasible that would be.
I'm down for it. I'd love to see it happen.
My answer to that question would be I would assume it would be easier to clone other extinct species that's a little closer to the time of man. Like I could see them trying to clone like a saber-toothed tiger or something like that, or right. So that's always been my guess, that they would probably be able to do that, since we have intact fossils and whatnot, especially that have been frozen under ice.
yeah, it would be really cool to see them clone a human from like that frozen man that still has skin on his bone. I don't know if you guys have ever.
You're talking about the Iceman and the Iceman.
Yeah. He's been frozen for like, I think it was like 100,000 or 50,000 years, and he still has skin on his bones, and like his face is still very much preserved from the ice. And it would be very cool to clone him and like introduce him to the world. But I think there's a very thin line between cloning and world devastation. There's just a very like thin margin of error for that.
Yeah,
like, it's terrifying.
This raises a question of scientific ethics, right? That there's one of the best scenes in this movie is when they're just all sitting around eating dinner together, right? And they're just all debating this stuff, right? And they're like, if we can do it, but should we do it? Right? We can do it, but should we do it? That's the ultimate question here. What's the whole class think about that question, right? We can do it, but should we do it? I know what Will's answer is. What are the rest of you guys? What are the rest of you
Well,
guys?
Well, it's not so much that I don't think we should do it. I just think that it has to be heavily controlled because I'm a man of science and I understand how easily things can go awry. Let me throw my cat outside real quick.
Yeah, I agree with Will on that. I feel like if you should do it though, because we need to like study about it and stuff, learn about it, but definitely heavily contained. Especially just not like an electric fence. That's like something you'd have for horses. These are like on T-Rex.
Yeah. Yeah, they didn't think about what if the power went down. They didn't think about that.
Yeah. And
Uh,
especially not like a park either. That's like the worst thing you could have.
on question 2, actually, Desmond answered that. So, you want to elaborate on your picks a little bit?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I really like the original cast, but I mean,
I agree.
I just thought those were some interesting choices for
Mine would be
Alan Grant.
mine would be Tom Hanks and probably Julia Roberts, or no, Mel Gibson.
Hell, yeah.
Mel Gibson and Julia Roberts.
What would Mel Gibson believe?
Alan Grant.
I feel like Matthew McConaughey as a scientist would be pretty good.
All right.
I feel like he'd have played a good Ian Malcolm role.
Yeah.
Let me just say that I think Chris Pratt's role in the new movies is complete bullshit.
Oh my God, man.
Yeah.
He does such a good job. I love those movies. I think he's a great actor.
I just don't like the character.
Yeah, he's kind of goofy for the role. Not a very serious partake compared to the old ones.
Sam Neill's a pretty good actor. He actually almost became James Bond in the 80s instead of Pierce Brosnan. He was the second choice. So yeah, I've always enjoyed his works. He's got that British accent. He's very hardcore British. Right?
Oh yeah, he was very cognate. There were certain points in the movie I had to turn on subtitles. I'm like, I just don't want to put in the effort to try and understand what he says, because that was my problem for a lot of those older movies. Is like mic quality was not the best, so I have to turn on subtitles now to understand them.
Yeah, I always watch movies with subtitles. That's a question. I'd be interested to hear what all of you guys do, if you guys do it or not.
I do actually watch movies with subtitles.
I go full blast.
Do you go full blast so that you don't
do
have to have
both.
subtitles?
Yep. When I can't hear it, like I go back 10 seconds and turn it up to like 100.
That's actually something that's sort of an interesting debate, like in film and stuff. Is like, because you guys know Squid Game is very popular right now. Well, a lot of people are complaining about subtitles with that. I'm like, it's in a foreign language, so it sounds better that way. And just to read what's happening, I think you get the context. But I wonder what it's like for other people that have English movies that have to watch them in their own subtitles, like Jurassic Park. Like, there's a lot of references in the Jurassic Park movies that make sense to us because they make a lot of like American culture references and stuff like that, but it doesn't really make sense to other people. And I think it's just an interesting concept. Oh, and can I bring up something about the movie that's sort of the mise-en-scene, Mr. Yeager?
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody knows this or not, but like almost all of the effects in the first Jurassic Park movie are completely practical, as much as they could get them to be. And I think even now, those practical effects hold up better than some CGI effects that they do even now. Like the new Jurassic Park movies don't hold up as well whenever it comes to dinosaurs as the old ones do.
I agree with that. They don't look anywhere near as realistic as the old movies, which doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Yeah, and that's what I really like, because in those older movies we get genuine reactions because they built a full T-Rex. Like I think it was like 2 tons worth of like steel skin plaster and makeup that they made for this thing, and like had it on a moving swivel, whatever it was. And then Steven Spielberg is much of a man. He's like, if you can do it practically, then do it, that way instead of CGI, which I really appreciate, because I still think that practical effects are better than CGI.
Yeah, I would have been interested to heard what you thought of the Terminator in that regard, Will, because the Terminator. Last week we talked about effects in that movie a lot, how they haven't aged too well.
Yeah, the like fake skin on the Terminator didn't age well, but they made it much better in the newer movies. Like even in the second, Terminator movie, whenever you have like the T-2000 or whatever it is, that's just completely like liquid metal, I think that looks better than even just the first movie. But that's a CGI effect. But that, I think, is the kind of movie where it's so high sci-fi that you need a little bit of CGI, because there's not a lot that you can do practical wise there. But if you have a movie where you just like need an alien creature, like in The Fifth Element, they have a lot of aliens, and all those effects are practical effects or heavy makeup or puppets, and they look phenomenal. I can't imagine what CGI would look like instead of those.
Yeah, I wanted to bring up the sound design in this movie too. I actually got to see this movie in the theaters over the summer. They showed it out in the theater in Beckley over the summer, and the sound, like I think this movie's greatest innovation is in the sound design. Like it's hard to emulate when you watch it on your TV. Like the scene where the Tyrannosaurus Rex roars for the first time. Like if you watch that in a theater, like it'll just put chill bumps down your spine. Right? It's like the sound design in this movie is incredible. I think that's one of its best innovations. You could probably emulate that if you have like a good surround sound set up or whatever, and if you have a home theater. But watching this in the theater, like it was a completely different experience than when I watched it on HBO Max last night again. Like it was.
It's funny that you say that, because my dad just bought me a new like TV and like setup stuff. I don't know why he bought it for me. He just bought all this stuff for me, and I've got surround sound speakers now in my room, and I watched that movie like that last night. It was a really good experience, because this is a 86-inch TV with like a bunch of high quality surround sound, and this is the first time that I've got to watch a movie like this in forever that wasn't in a movie theater. And like just comparing my home experience of Jurassic Park to going and watching Venom on Friday, like there's such a drastic difference.
I still haven't seen the new Venom yet. I watched James Bond the other day though.
Oh, Venom is fantastic. I was rooting for the villains pretty much the whole time, but also just It's fantastic. You need to go see it in theaters.
It was a good movie.
Are you asking what was a good movie?
I'm saying it was a good movie. I watched it the other day.
Oh, it's so great. And it's so true to the comics as well. I love Tom Hardy.
Yeah, he's a good actor. Perfect for the role. You see the after credit scene?
No, my friend told me about it, and I was like, no, I didn't even see that because I couldn't stick around. It was getting real late, and I had to drive at night.
Yeah, it was big. It was a big announcement.
Yeah, let's not spoil it for Mr. Yeager.
Yeah, I'm not going to, but it was wild. You'll be impressed. You really will. I want to talk about the question that says, what would your initial reaction be like seeing a dinosaur in real life for the first time? Anybody in specific that would like to answer that question?
Run away.
You run away?
I would run away.
I would try to pet it.
Cry. I can cry.
What about you, Will? What would you do if you saw a dinosaur face to face for the first time?
I think I have a really unique perspective on this because I play a game called Ark Survival Evolved.
I've played that.
And you have to deal with dinosaurs constantly. The first time I ever played that game scared me to death because the proportions are life size and the scale and everything is accurate. And so the first time I ever, went into the water, I'm like, what's that? Megalodon charging at me. And I'm like, that's terrifying. I am now going to never go in the ocean again. So my initial reaction is it depends on the dinosaur. Triceratops, herbivores, they're fine. They're not going to eat you on first sight. A raptor, a Spinosaurus, a Mosasaurus, anything like that, no, thank you.
I could not agree more because the first time I played that game, I saw a megalodon off rip and I got scared too. So I quit playing.
And the worst part is you need to go into the ocean to get oil, but there's megalodons out there.
What game is it again?
Ark Survival Evolved. It's all about dinosaurs. Best part of that game is the dodo birds, though, because you get to punch them and they're like one shot unconscious. And then you get to keep them in your house. Listen, that's the thing about, video games and movies is they intersect in a lot of areas. And I think this is one of them that it's a good thing to have examples of both because Ark is literally just Jurassic Park on steroids. Because Ark is all about these like giant, alien structures that just contain like prehistoric animals and stuff like that, as if, Jurassic Park had run wild and just, they were let go into the wild and bred and just, exist now, and that is their land. I think that's a good comparison to Jurassic Park because it's just like, this is what could happen in the future if we let this run rampant. And that in the entire 3 movies of the trilogy, like to go on, because it's a continual story, the government progressively tries to shut them down. And then in Jurassic World, we have, it's government sanctioned now. It should be safe. Literally, the worst thing that's happened to Jurassic Park was in Jurassic World.
Which movie was your favorite? Have you seen them all?
Me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen them all.
Which one's your favorite?
Personally, probably the first one. It had the most impact on me, and then it went downhill, and then got to Jurassic World and all that. I don't enjoy Jurassic World for one, Chris Pratt, and two, the utter ridiculousness of it, because they create this gigantic thing because it's like, we need them to be more dangerous. We need, attraction. And I'm like, that is not how you get attraction. You let people ride the nice dinosaurs. That's how you get more people to come and see dinosaurs. You don't create something that can literally bite a T-Rex in half, you know. But it's just the ridiculousness of Jurassic World. Like, you have to have a suspension of disbelief whenever it comes to sci-fi movies like this, but you just get to a point to where it's like, okay, just go suck an egg or something.
What?
It just gets to a point to where you don't, like, your suspension of disbelief doesn't suspend anymore.
What was the big whale crocodile thing in Jurassic World? What was that?
Yeah, that was a Mosasaurus, and we didn't even get to see that for most of the movie. And then it's like, oh, convenient plot point. Here you go. Like, thank you for the plot resolution.
Movie 3 was my favorite by far.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, 2001. That was my favorite one for sure.
the one with Sam Neill and yeah, the one where he goes to rescue the kid. Yeah.
Yeah. Billy
I
steals
also-
the eggs.
I also just love this movie because it has Samuel Jackson in it. Like, if I had to put a tier list, it's Morgan Freeman, Samuel Jackson, ScarJo, and that's my top 3. Which I would have said in these newer movies, I would have cast, people like ScarJo and potentially Cameron Diaz.
Aaliyah said last class that she would have recasted ScarJo as Sarah Connor.
It would, listen, in the new movies, it would absolutely work. I feel that very strongly. Listen, I'm a firm believer that ScarJo can play in any role that she wants to. I'm a man that likes other men, but she just, I don't know, she just does something to me. I love her to death, and she can play in any role ever. I would love to see her as the new female James Bond that they're wanting to do. I think she'd do great in that.
My favorite one of the series is probably this one too. I like the second one, The Lost World, a lot too. But this one's by far the best one, just because it asks so many questions. Right? It's not just a popcorn flick, right? It does make us think about ethics and should we do it, things like that, right? I think that's what makes it good science fiction. Good science fiction, I think, makes you think about the what ifs in life. Right.
Mr. Jager, I want to ask you real quick too on the 4th question, because that's like my favorite line in like any movie ever is life finds a way. And I don't even I'm not big on the whole evolution theory, but I do think that like it's wild how far like the economy has come and the world has grown. So life always does find a way to advance and develop. So like that line, I know it's such a simple one-liner, but it means so much to the movie itself just because they're all female. So I was going to ask you how you feel about that quote.
Yeah. I mean, this idea of chaos theory that what Goldblum's character proclaims here. I mean, I think that's an interesting concept. I mean, it goes all the way. That idea goes all the way to like quantum physics, right? Like if you study quantum physics today, quantum physics suggests that everything in our universe is built off of chaos, right? There are smaller particles in the universe than even the atom, right? The quarks and things like that, right? I'm very much given the spark notes of all this, right? But and quantum theory suggests that hey, the universe is based off of chaos, like life being created came about out of pure chaos, right? So that idea goes against religion for sure, right? This modern science, because well, in religion, God created the world, right? So whatever God you subscribe to and whatever religion, right? God created the world. So the idea that life sprang about just based out of pure chaos, right? I think that's an interesting concept. And yeah, the one liner, life will find a way, right? I mean, just think about like all the unlimited probabilities that it took to even
Yeah.
have life if we subscribe to quantum theory, right? What were the odds? One, several trillion, right? That would actually happen.
That's what I'm saying.
Right?
And then on top of that, like after the asteroid impact, I think that's where the quote "life finds a way" is the biggest and impactful, because the entire world was shrouded in ash, and vegetation and life didn't really prosper, and there was very little plant life or animal life. So most of the carnivorous species died off or went extinct, except for things like the great white shark and birds, obviously. But it's just very interesting how stressful that event was. Like that was an extinction level event, and there was still life afterwards, that existed in like microscopic organisms and like very, very small animals that were able to live underground and survive.
Yep.
It's just extremely interesting to think about how little humans have had an impact on the world for the longest time, and then we get to like 300 years ago, and then we start destroying a planet that literally survived a meteoric impact of epic proportions, and now we're causing our own extinction. It's very ironic.
Right. I think the crocodiles have lived since those times too, haven't they?
Yeah. And it's also very funny to think that birds and crocodiles and alligators are very closely related whenever it comes to the species Astorum. I don't know. I just find things like that very interesting, that, we have a crocodile and a bird, and they both just are very closely related. Like you look at their DNA and it's like a 64.3% match. And the only reason I know that is because I looked it up like 2 weeks ago, because I have a weird brain. But and then we've got humans, which we didn't evolve at all. We just made tools, and it's like, cool, we're gonna walk upright a little bit and use a hammer, and that's as far as we're gonna go, because we still eat and drink and breathe for the same hole. And that we have a very little thing that's like a lump of flesh that's like, oh, this is heavy enough to go to your stomach, but can also do that with water and air. We didn't evolve very much past, oh, here's a little bit of convenience. Other than that, figure it out with tools.
Have you ever seen 2001: A Space Odyssey, Will?
Yes.
Your comment made me think of that.
I don't know. I feel like I'm the only person that actually thinks that humans are very poorly designed. We are, because like we get every illness in the book. We develop like new and worsening problems. Like it just gets worse and worse as we go on, because we did not adapt to survive. We just made tools and we relied on tools. Because if humans didn't have tools, we would not be the dominant species on this planet. It would probably still be things like the woolly mammoth, or like anything else that was a giant land-based animal would still probably have prevalence over humanity.
Our biggest advantage is our hands. Right? No other creature has that, right?
Yeah. Until we teach dogs how to wield knives. That's a big thing on TikTok. People teach their dogs how to use knives, and it really freaks me out.
Mr. Yeager, I have one more question for you.
All right.
Would you consider this movie series a top 3 to top 5 movie series of all time?
That's a tough one.
I got it at number 1, man.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You think about a lot of good series, right? The James Bond, right? Or even like a bunch of like different horror franchises, right? Like Halloween or Indiana Jones or Star Wars, right? Star Trek. That's a tough one.
I'd say sci-fi wise, maybe top 10, but like of all time, probably not. I think it definitely for its time had a unique appearance and like wow factor, but I think that only gets you so far whenever it comes to the movie industry, because then they made 2, 3, now we're on the World and the other ones, and I think there's another one coming out. Like that first movie is impactful because it's the first of its kind, and it's like, wow, it has that wow factor, but as you keep going on, it really, by comparison, isn't as good. So I'd say this is probably top 10 sci-fi, but I'd have to put things like The Fifth Element, Terminator, Blade Runner, and like the Star Wars franchise like above it in terms of like story, plot, and total enjoyment. But if you want like to do it by analogy, like an analogy of the human experience or, just evolution as a whole, I'd say it goes up further to like 5.
Yeah, there's always something that's been compelling about dinosaurs to everybody, right? I mean, ever since we've been little kids, right? Like they make dinosaur toys, right? Like something that's just inherently fascinating about dinosaurs to us. And it's probably that like unknowable aspect about it. Right?
Yeah.
The question you asked too about what would you do if you saw a dinosaur for the first time, right? My answer to that would be I don't know what I would do, right?
Yeah.
Just because it is so unknowable. I think that's what's so fascinating about them, because we have a desire to want to know everything as humanity, right? So
that was what I was going to mention. Something very interesting about dinosaurs is that scientists, until a couple of years ago, had no idea what colors or striations that a lot of them had. So they had made a lot of their colors up. So dinosaurs really could have been any color of the spectrum of rainbow. And that's just something very interesting to think about now that you've said, what would you do if you saw a dinosaur? I don't know. If I saw a pink T-Rex coming at me, I'd probably shit myself. Like, imagine you just got ganked by a 2-ton pink bus. What do?
I suppose the T-Rex wouldn't have had a reason not to be pink, right? It's not like it has to camouflage itself in the environment.
I mean, yeah, it was the apex predator of its era. I mean, if I was 25 feet tall and had a jaw that could bite through steel, I wouldn't have a need to hide either. What about you, Kyle?
What if I saw one?
No, what if you were an apex predator? What do you think you would care if you were like magenta?
Oh, I'd probably be purple for real.
I like the yellow T-Rex here on the last slide.
Yeah, just click one more time. Yeah, okay. That was the ending slide. Before I go, does anybody have any question for me? Any specific question from the movie that you'd like to ask me my opinion on?
I forget. did you like the fat man's death scene or no?
I actually did, because I mean, he kind of got what he deserved. He was being really shady, and like he was risking everyone's life just for his own pleasure. And so in the end of him risking everybody else's life, he also risked his own, and he lost that. So he got what he deserved in the film.
Any of you guys Seinfeld fans in here?
I watched it before that.
Yeah, that's what he's most known for is Newman on Seinfeld.
Yeah, I've seen him on there.
I
He was in Space Jam too, wasn't he? He was a manager.
In what movie?
Space Jam.
Yep.
Has anyone seen the new Space Jam? Because
Yes,
that was whack.
I
That
agree.
whole movie.
Garbage, absolute trash that should have never been made. There's one GOAT in this era of basketball, and it's always going to be Michael Jordan. Should have never put the ball in that role. His
I just
acting was
could've-
garbage.
That's another thing that I'm like, CGI sometimes just looks trash nasty. And that's one of the movies that exemplifies that. The only movie that I will give credit to CGI over practical is the Avatar movie, James Cameron Avatar, not M. Night Shyamalan's disgusting take on a classic Avatar: The Last Airbender. Ugh.
Isn't making a Netflix series about that live action?
They were supposed to, but the original creator walked off because they wouldn't cast how they wanted them to be cast. Because, obviously everyone in Avatar: The Last Airbender is of, Eastern Asian descent, and they wanted to make it a completely white cast. And I'm like, I would have walked off too, personally. If you're not going to realize my vision was something I created, you're not going to have it at all. But, back to what I was saying, James Cameron's Avatar is the only thing that I will give, CGI over practical effects, because that movie looks fantastic. And like 80% of the whole movie is in CGI.
Any thoughts here from others who might not have spoken up yet about the movie? Like your hot takes on this movie?
I think it was like one of the first family movies we watched. You had
Yeah.
the heartwarming scene with the children in it. I mean, even the children, like what family don't want to go in there and like see a dinosaur? It's kind of like for a younger audience, I feel like.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Keegan. I think that's a good point. Like, the kids are very important characters in this movie. I think it's something we haven't brought up yet, but like this sort of like childlike wonder and looking at these dinosaurs, I think that's a important facet of the movie. There's also the whole character development thing with, Lord Dern wants Sam Neill to have kids, right? So there's that whole aspect of Dr. Grant's character, right, wanting to have, like, becoming comfortable with the idea of being a parent, right? So you kind of see him warm up to the kids as the movie goes on, right? Which is heartwarming. So.
Yeah.
I really didn't even notice that until you said something about it, that this wasn't our family movie that we watched, because I'm sitting here thinking back and I'm like, we really had not watched a family-centric film the entire time. Like, it's always been The Godfather or, just something gritty that, not a whole family could enjoy. But, I'm sure Mr. Yeager, like your mom and your dad probably like took you to go see this or something,
I guess I would have been 6 when this movie came out. So yeah, I went to go see it.
and then you know, a dude gets killed by a bunch of tiny little chompies, and then you know you're like, oh, maybe this isn't a kids film.
It's kind of a nice segue over into horror films too, because this movie's a horror film in a couple of different places, right?
Yeah. Jurassic Park has that really good intersection of like sci-fi and horror, because like, you know, you can have sci-fi and you can have horror, but it's very hard to have both. Like the only movie franchise I think that does that well is like the first Alien movie.
Yeah, it is hard to do both. Yeah, the nice. I thought my most vivid memory of watching this in the theater was watching Wayne Knight get the stuff spit in his eyes for some reason or other. That stuck with me when I was like 6. I don't know why.
Was you like that was cool, or was you scared, or
Probably scared. Yeah,
probably scared?
it looked like such a cute dinosaur, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think that's another big thing too, is like cuteness over, you know, like actual feelings. Because you know your obvious reaction to small dinosaurs is like, oh, that's adorable, and then you just see 30 of them pop up and it's like, oh, okay, I understand now. And then you die. Yeah. And I think, you know, we would classify a lot of dinosaurs as cute, but they would probably crush us if we were in the way of them. You know, it's just it's just very interesting to think about how dinosaurs would interact with like modern society.
yeah, this is a franchise that I grew up with. A lot of you guys born in early 2000s, right? The franchise was kind of on its way out around that time, but only came back a couple of years ago. So, Kyle, I'm surprised you're as nostalgic about it as you are, considering you probably didn't necessarily like, grow up going to the theaters to go see them and stuff.
Yeah, no, they were introduced to me as a small child and I fell in love with them, man.
I'm the same way with another one of Spielberg's classics is the Animaniacs. Like I was brought up on those, and people were like, "That was in the '90s. You were born 2001." I'm like, it's still what I was brought up with. You know, I still love going back and rewatching any Animaniacs episode. It's great. And I feel like with this movie in particular, you know, it's such a timeless classic that you don't really need to, you know, have been born and seen the movie before to be nostalgic about it. You know, it's just an old classic movie, you know, like Terminator or The Godfather.
Yeah, for a movie so built on special effects and stuff, it holds up, right? For the reasons I think you elaborated on earlier, Will.
Yeah. Practical effects just work better and they age much, much better.
They had the budget for this movie to make the practical effects good. That's something to consider too. I mean, this is the definition of a big Hollywood blockbuster. Right? So, like all of the other films we watch too don't really fit into that. Like even the original Terminator didn't really have a big budget. Terminator 2 did, but not 1.
Yeah, and that's a good thing too, because Terminator 2 is probably the best one out of the three of them.
Oh yeah.
But you know, I think it's really nice whenever the first film in the series can set up the other ones to be better, because I think that's really what a lot of them are for. You know, except in like the case of The Godfather, we got two good movies, and the third one was kind of
Did you ever watch it, Will?
I haven't got around to it yet. I've been so busy with all my other classes. It's an essay every day, I swear. But yeah, I really love practical effects, and just to have them is really nice. I forget what movie it is, but like practical effects will just always hold up better because they just look better. And to have things just be CGI'd all the time, it just kind of feels lazy. And I don't think the audience appreciates them as much anymore, especially with like big films like, you know, like Endgame and all the Marvel movies that have super, you know, overloaded CGI. I mean, it looks good, but I mean, you know, it could be better if they were done with practical effects. Oh, that's what movie it was. King Kong. King Kong has a lot of you know, practical effects whenever it comes to like you know, the small creatures and like the actual like interaction whenever they first get to that island. You know, it's really nice to just see that because it's like in the film and it feels real and it feels good and it's not like overly done poorly. Like King Kong and Godzilla movies are really good whenever it comes to like practical effects like that till you get to the later movies.
Any other thoughts on Jurassic Park before we close it out? And if you guys are readers, I would encourage you to read the Crichton novels too. They're actually pretty good. So they're breezy reads. They're not too hard to read. But they're fun to read. So if you guys like the movies, definitely check out the books too. They get a lot more into like the science aspects of it. Like he heavily researched all this genetic stuff and he popularized it for a general audience, which I think is a very as far as a writer goes, I think that's a very hard thing to do, right? To take such complex ideas and popularize them for everyone. So check the books out too. Crichton's done a lot of stuff over the years that became movies and TV shows. I think he's dead now, though. But yeah, he was kind of like sci-fi Tom Clancy, as far as coming up with a bunch of stuff. So looking ahead, next up is The Shining. The Shining is up next. So Kaylin is their scheduled presenter. Is Kaylin here today? She's normally on Zoom.
I think she left a little bit ago. I thought I saw her leave.
Yeah, I'll send her an email and reminder that Thursday's her day.
You said The Shining. Is it bad that my first thought of The Shining is that scene where he looks up out of the door as he's giving that blowjob, and it's just a dude in a dog costume, and it's like, well, this happening. That's the first thing I think about with The Shining.
Yeah, I think once you see that scene, I think nobody forgets it.
God. Or the "Here's Johnny." Two best parts of that whole movie.
So let me take one more look at something here. So I'm still gonna. I've been behind on my grading. I've been working through like 50 lit papers for my other class. Two of you in here are in that class. So as far as work goes, we still have another short paper to do, and a final paper to do. Final paper. There's technically we had a midterm paper and a final paper. What I'm thinking about doing, we'll see what you guys think about this. I'm thinking about this like combining the midterm paper and the final paper to be like one big paper. And then that'll just be worth slightly more. That way you have to do one less paper. What do y'all think about that? I won't do it unless you give me the authorization. All right, what do y'all think about that?
I think it's a good idea. I think it's a good idea.
Yeah. I like that idea.
Okay.
I like it because it gives us a bigger time frame and like more ability to create a final-esque paper and it be of higher caliber than just, you know, two split papers.
Yeah, a more descriptive paper.
Right.
Yeah, and it'll give us a chance to experience more movies, so we have even more experience. So I think that's a swell idea.
Okay, so that's what I'll do. So instead of the midterm being worth like 15 and the final being worth like 25, I'll probably combine it where the final paper is worth like 40. Right, so that's a pretty big chunk. But if I give it enough time to cook for you all of you all should do well.
Yeah.
All right, so yeah, we'll have one more short paper and a big final paper. So I'll cut one of the papers out.
Thank goodness that you're not like Mr. Kirk, because he's just paper after paper after paper after paper. I'm like, just give us some multiple answers test. Like,
And so one less paper is a good thing. So,
one less thing for you to grade too.
all right, so yeah, that'll be how I'll do it. We'll combine the midterm and the final paper together. I'll introduce that later. So that way we don't have to spend time taking away from the movies to talk writing for a while. We can just go straight on with the movies.
When is our next paper due? Is it due soon or?
I could probably get the second short paper out soon. Well, I'll probably issue that once we're done with horror. Once we're done with horror, I'll give questions about sci-fi and horror for the second short paper. I want to get the first ones back to you before I give you a second. Right? So. Yeah, so once we're done with horror, I'll get that. We're mostly going to have presentations over the next couple of weeks. So everybody signed up to do presentations on horror for the most part. All right, guys. So enjoy The Shining. It's not family friendly, right? So, but it's a good time. So one of the most famous directors ever, Stanley Kubrick. So and it's got Jack, right? So what else can you ask?
All right. I'll
See you
see
guys.
y'all later.